Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice, and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Each episode is a conversation with inspiring people who make wonderful contributions to our knowledge in these areas and spark curiosity and ideas to pursue. Join me, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
If you can understand what your brand promise is as an individual or an organisation, then you are going to thrive. So, what's your change agenda? What are you really trying to change in the world, whether that's in life or work or an organisation or in your family even? And how are you the best person to do that? And if you can understand that dynamic and create an authentic story about that makes it personal and makes it relatable, and then practice it, then you are going to be able to differentiate yourself really well.
Hi there, Innovator. It's really great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I trust too that you enjoyed my recent conversations with Summer Oase, email conversion strategist, and with Joey Coleman, author of Never Lose a Customer Again. I'm really excited today to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest Sarah Anderson, who's the co-founder and director of Visibility Co. Sarah is an award-winning strategist and global engagement expert with deep experience across corporate, non-profit and government sectors in Australia and also internationally. She thrives on being at the forefront of change and is driven by partnering with leaders, change agents, purpose-led organisations to facilitate strategic thinking that leads to collaborative leadership, to personal and business growth, and visibility as well as connection. Sarah is also part of the faculty for Homeward Bound, a transformational leadership initiative for women with a background in science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine from all around the world. So we'll learn more about that in today's episode too. A quick promotional message from our sponsor, InnovaBuzz. We help coaches and consultants build professional credibility, engage their target audience, and connect with their ideal clients. To gain absolute clarity about who your ideal clients are and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship, take a look at our Marketing Master mini class at innovabuzz.co/marketing master. In less than 30 minutes, you'll gain that absolute clarity and you won't look back from there. It's completely transformational. And the Marketing Master mini class is free and you can access it even without giving away your email. In our discussion today, Sarah talked to me about being visible in a way that is congruent with your values. She explained how you can build visible leadership by beginning with knowing and showing up to yourself first, and how we can all be visible leaders and lead change for good. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Sarah Anderson. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Melbourne, Australia, Sarah Anderson, who's co-founder and director of Visibility Co. And she works there with businesses, individuals and teams to articulate their purpose, their vision, create meaningful goals and put pragmatic plans in place to bring all of that to life. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thanks so much. It's a privilege to be here. I'm excited.
Emanuela Grace, who was our guest on episode 208 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a conversation with you, Sarah. So a big hello to Emanuela.
Yes, hello, Emanuela, and thank you for that kind intro. Yes, I know Emanuela from a few different contexts in life. She's fabulous.
She is, yeah. We work together on a bunch of things as well.
Great.
Now, you work on a range of aspects, including organisational marketing and communication strategy, also coaching individuals and organisations to help them find fulfilment and success as it matters to them. So I'm really interested to digging more into all of that with you today, because there's a lot there, and I know the idea of success, how it matters to the client, is really important, as opposed to success as somebody else might define it. So looking forward to digging into that today. You're also leader of the Homeward Bound project, or one of the leaders of the Homeward Bound project, which is a strategic leadership and science initiative for women. And I've just been looking through the website of the people that I believe are in Antarctica right now as we speak, and it looks absolutely sensational. So you were part of the expedition to Antarctica last year.
Yes.
And I think there were 78, if I remember correctly, global science women, and you taught about leadership and strategy and engagement there.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, they are the great projects which I'm lucky enough to be involved in. And yes, it's an exciting time for the Homeward Bound project, with this time 100 women leaders from a science and STEM background on the ship in Antarctica as we speak, and travelling around and exploring their own leadership and identity in the world, as well as seeing some of the incredible landscape and experiences that is Antarctica. So it's always an exciting time to be able to share the journey of Homeward Bound and invite other people to join it as well.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that a little bit later, because I'm really interested in that and how people might be able to find out more. But before we start talking about all things leadership and purpose and vision, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the pivotal moments in that journey?
Yeah. So like most people, I've had a meandering path to get to where I am today, and, you know, a wonderful heady combination of personal and professional milestones along the way that get you there. But I think it comes together starting with growing up in country Victoria, and coming from a big family. I've got 4 brothers and a sister, and being lucky enough to be in a very free environment when I was growing up, where there was lots of room to explore and be outside, but also get bored and be interested in answering questions and making up games and doing concerts and all the things that I think gave me a fantastic basis for being creative. And so I think I started a lot of my early life being creative and problem solving, and having that space to ask big questions and why is this and why are we doing this? And then professionally, I started out with a lot of creative inputs, but doing more generalist study. So I went to Melbourne University and did a Bachelor of Arts in English and art history. So I had that kind of research and reflective side, but also the creative side, but started a corporate career while I was studying as well. And so from an early age, I've kind of had that combination of the business interest and commercial side, as well as the creative side going on. And for a long time, I didn't know how those two things were going to come together, as I think a lot of people have that experience of how I got to reconcile all of these different parts of me into one space. But I was lucky enough to work in lots of different contexts, from government to non-profit to big corporates in Australia and overseas over about 15 years, and have space to explore what different environments felt like and how I could use my skills in different areas. And a lot of that was working in corporate communications and brand and marketing, and working with CEOs and C-suite leaders to help them to engage with audiences and connect to communities in ways that were meaningful to them. And that took me through a lot of different experiences in contexts such as the global financial crisis, where I was working for a global property consultancy in London. So that was a whole experience with the largest property downturn ever at that point, through to working with some social impact causes like violence against children and exploring that side of things. But I think the common themes for me were exploring what my values were and working out ways to be congruent with them. And what I realised was that working in corporate communications, there was lots of ways that I was taught to engage and to communicate, and lots of ways that I observed leaders in lots of spaces leading and engaging that didn't really align with who I was and my values. And so, a lot at that time, big hierarchical organisations, the way that they communicated was that most people in the organisation were silent, and the voice of the organisation was projected out into the public through one or two or a handful of people. So it was one person speaking for most people. It was a lot about bringing together the best things and the things that you wanted to make shiny and put those out into the world as your brand and your marketing, and hiding maybe the bits that weren't so great and putting them behind. And a lot of what I saw just didn't really resonate as natural and authentic ways that humans wanted to connect and communicate. So over time, I guess I started to build my own methodology of how an individual could be visible in ways that did resonate with their values and in ways that did make them feel authentic. And the same for organisations, that there were ways of doing this that felt much more congruent. And at the same time, we were witnessing the very much the birth of the social and digital revolution, which, as you can imagine, the values of that social web, at least initially, were much more about openness and connectivity and everyone having a voice and transparency. And that felt a lot more real to me. So I jumped on that bandwagon and was able to go into different organisations and use social and digital media really as a Trojan horse for creating the kinds of transformation and cultural change that did feel values and purpose and vision based, and did feel like it gave lots of different people a voice. And in that process, that really cemented a lot of my ideas about what it means to be visible and what it means to authentically engage with people that are meaningful to you and engage with the world. And so I got to a point in my life having a child, and where the corporate life wasn't really congruent with my life anymore. And I decided to take the big leap that lots of people think about and take all of those learnings and ideas of how I thought it was meaningful to engage and create a business and a movement around visibility and how it could be done differently, because I really believed that was possible. So I joined forces with my Julia May, who's my best friend and now business partner, and also my next door neighbour. Our lives are very entwined, and we launched this thing that we call Visibility and Visibility Co, our business, and also joined forces with Homeward Bound, launching a visibility program within their inaugural program where, we teach people to be visible leaders in their lives wherever they find themselves, and make movements that matter, whether that's you as an individual or an organisation or an important issue that needs to be solved in the world, like climate change or health, but really focused on accelerating change for good and changing some of the systems that are not working for us in our world.
Fascinating. It's an interesting journey. And I like the exploration very early on about, doing work that's congruent with your own values, and then setting up your own business so that it was definitely congruent with your own values because you've got full control over how you can construct that.
Exactly. And I kind of wish that more career advisors would say to teenagers when they're at school, not just, what are you great at and what do you want to do, but what might be in alignment with your values and who you are as a person and your vision for yourself. And I think probably people would have much less meandering career paths if they come at it from that basis from early on.
Yeah. Although sometimes, I was having a conversation this morning. I was a guest on a podcast and the question came up, well, tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today. And I said, well, this is kind of very meandering and very haphazard, but the way I relate it and the way I've kind of summarized the whole thing so I can talk about it in a very succinct way, it sounds as though there was a real structure and plan to the whole thing, but there wasn't. So
and that's part of the beauty of both looking backwards, but also storytelling, where you can often pull the different pieces of your story together in ways that do end up making sense, even if at the time it's quite intuitive and you're making choices based on where you are at that moment as you go along.
All right. Now, you mentioned visible leaders. So what exactly do you mean by visible leaders?
Yeah. So incorporated in, I guess, the way that we see the world from a visibility point of view is that visible leadership comes through the 3 pillars of visibility. And we see that as first and foremost, the first pillar being visible to yourself. And that really means that you understand your purpose and your vision and your values as an individual, and that you are self-aware and living and working in alignment with who you are. And really, from where we sit, that's the only place that you can authentically lead visibly, is if you know those things, your drivers and your strengths and your challenges and your blind spots, and where you can, as a leader, take responsibility for your thoughts and behaviours and your energy in order to move forward constructively in the world. So that's the first pillar, visibility to self. The second is around visibility to others, and that's more what people think about when they think about visible leadership, like having a platform, being influential, being seen by other people. But really, that should come after, first and foremost, being visible to yourself, so that when you are ready to step out into the world, you can do so with this real intention and self-awareness. But then ideally, you would also come to that visibility to self with a strategic mindset and some techniques and tools around how you can be most effective to other people, whether that's through one-on-one interactions or social media or within your organisation being influential, whatever those platforms are for being visible to others. And then the third pillar is collective visibility, so that once you've achieve that platform and visibility for yourself, that you can use that as a platform for others, whether that's for causes or the organisation you work for, or a social impact movement that you're passionate about, or for pulling other people up in their visibility and helping other people with their impact and their influence. So, when we talk about visible leadership, that's kind of the framework that we're coming at it from, and that's where we've seen really people transform their ability to have impact in the world and then take their own leadership and use it for amazing causes and bigger things, whether that's women in leadership and the environment, such as something like Homeward Bound tries to tackle, or whether it's more on a smaller scale for you within your life. That's the pillars are the same, whether you're tackling your own life and your leadership of your life, or your leadership of an organisation or an issue.
Yeah, I like the structure, and it's probably a little bit like a pyramid, isn't it? And the one, like you mentioned, visibility to others is probably the one most people think of when you think of visibility, and that's getting out in front of other people to spread your message. But the visibility to self, I think, is probably the biggest challenge.
Definitely.
So I'm interested to know how do you work with people
Yeah.
to kind of get them much clearer on that self-awareness
Yeah.
and visibility to self.
It's funny because what we see a lot, as you've just rightfully pointed out, is that, you know, the visibility to others is the itch that people both want scratched initially, and it's the Trojan horse,
Yeah.
and it's what people kind of come to. I've got this problem. I want to, you know, have 300,000 followers on Instagram, or I want to get into this job, or whatever it is. I want to start this movement. But the reality is that the vast majority of the work is in that visibility to self category. But the fabulous thing is, if you spend the time there initially, it pays off so much more. And the visibility to others piece actually becomes quite easy and process and straightforward because you've done the work there. And so once people come in and they, if they believe us that the work is in the visibility to self piece first, then people see the benefits so quickly that they understand then the relationship between the different pillars of visibility. So there's a few different ways that we help people to create visibility to self first and foremost. We work with those fundamentals of visibility, which we see as knowing your purpose and your vision and your values. And they're terms that get thrown around a lot, but actually the work involved in that is absolutely transformational. If you can see that beacon on the top of the hill of this is where I'm looking towards in 5 years or 10 years or whenever it is, it becomes really clear whether each step that you take gets you closer to that point or not. It's a very, even though it sounds lofty and big, it's a very day-to-day anchor for someone in their visibility to themselves. And it's not a hugely difficult thing to articulate. It's often for people just stepping out and making the time to do that, and often coming up with a really inspiring sentence for themselves that they can hold on to and go, yes, that's it for me. That's why I do what I do. That's why I get out of bed every morning. And values can be the same, knowing those fundamental drivers that are influencing your behaviour every day, whether you're aware of it or not, and then being able to see, oh, that's why I don't get along with that person in my organisation, or that's why I am clashing with my partner on something. It's actually a values conversation. It's not about that we're not compatible or that we're enemies or anything like that. And so these fundamentals of purpose and vision and values, they actually infuse the way that people see themselves immediately, and they start to change and depersonalize issues and make you able to hold things at arm's length and say, okay, I can have a bit more neutrality in the way that I am behaving in every situation because I understand who I am, what's driving me, and that often the places that we rub up against other people are not because of anything sinister. They're just that we come from a different perspective on what we're trying to achieve or who we are and what's driving us. So that's kind of the key fundamentals. But then we also work with just coaching around self-awareness, and that can take the form of anything from getting to know your own internal narrative and your self-talk and reframing some of the things that you're telling yourself, which is often, you know, why we can't do things. And there's all these old tapes being played that we're not really aware of until we start to notice them. And then there's lots of practical tools that we help people to establish to help them with those things. That might be mindfulness and meditation. I'm also a yoga teacher, so I try to incorporate as many of those things into how we work because they're amazing tools that help everyone to manage their energy and see what's really going on for them. We also use reflective journaling practices a lot of the time that can be really quite insightful for helping you to become aware of some of the things that are going on for you and perhaps holding you back, and lots of other tools like that just help to operationalize and make day-to-day things that can seem quite big. If you've got a big blockage yourself as a leader, it can seem like a really big thing to tackle. But if you break it down to, here's something that I can do every day for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, suddenly, you can eat what seems like an elephant bite by bite, bite by bite, and it becomes more manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that bite by bite analogy. My the piano teacher that my children had when they were learning these huge long piano concertos that went for 40 minutes or so on, and I was always amazed, how can you possibly learn such a complicated and long piece of music? And she said it's like eating pizza, one piece at a time.
Exactly, yes. And that's the only way we
So
ever do anything, isn't
always
it? It's
remember
just that sometimes they seem insurmountable. I like the pizza one too. That's even more manageable than eating an elephant.
Yeah. All right. Now, coming back to articulating a purpose and vision for yourself, I mean, to me, um, that can be pretty challenging because in a business sense, it's a lot more straightforward. People come up with, well, here's my expertise. These are my customers that I can help. This is the problem that I can solve. And so the purpose becomes around, we solve this problem for these people. And that's essentially the purpose of the business. But in terms of a personal purpose, people are kind of looking at, well, are we going to be somebody that's an inspirational leader, like say the Dalai Lama or Nelson Mandela or somebody like that? And yet, most people aren't at that kind of level of changing the world or influencing so many people. They're just, they have a small circle and so on. How do you work with people to when they're in that situation to develop a kind of a personal purpose statement or vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very common with something like purpose, which is really a buzzword these days, isn't it? It gets thrown around all the time in lots of different contexts, and in my view, can be really over-egged. And it's often a lot more simple than that, in that it is just understanding your why. But I think where it gets confused is that, particularly for people as individuals, they think it has to be the answer to the meaning of life for them. And the way that we deal with purpose is really that you can have a purpose for anything. You can have a purpose for the day that makes you much more meaningful in this particular day, and a lot more efficient and focused. And so we take to it for what kind of purpose is going to solve the problem that you are trying to solve at the moment. So it doesn't make it that much different from how you're talking about an organisational purpose, in the sense that it has to be practical. It has to solve a problem for people. So if someone's problem is, I'm not happy in this role that I'm in, I've got this big idea inside me that I know I have to get out there and I want to launch this big movement that is going to matter, then the purpose is connected to the kind of time frame and problems related to that scenario. It's not about saying, okay, for that person, what is the purpose of their whole life? So I guess part of the magic is chunking it down to what is the purpose, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve at that time. But the process is often really similar, in the sense that we take them through a purpose session, which is a verbal coaching session, one-on-one, where we ask a series of questions. A lot of the questions start with why, as you can imagine, but it gets down below the surface to that why that often makes people cry, and it's a why that gets to the heart of what is really at their core at the moment, what's driving their often pain points or fears, and what they're trying to do at the moment. So it's a verbal process, and we find that it's difficult to do it without a conversation, a really safe conversation about what it is. So it's not something that, from our point of view, you would jump in and do with someone when you've never had a conversation with them before, you haven't established rapport, because when you're talking about purpose, it is often emotional, and you want to be creating a safe space for people to explore emotionally what it really is that's driving them. And then, once you've done that initial session where you really deep dive into some of those big why questions, it's something that often needs to ferment for people, and they settle into it and they have a think about it. But we have found it as useful for saying, okay, why do you want to make that move to a new house, as it is for some people in saying, yes, I do want to explore my bigger purpose in my legacy or something that I want to contribute to the world. But it's really about giving meaning and focus to your life or your impact in a way which makes the choices in the present much easier.
That's great. I like that. And the connecting it to a strong emotional feeling is a really good motivator, because the more emotion something brings up that's a purpose or objective that you have, the more motivated you're likely to be. And I don't know who said this. I remember this saying, and whether it's a quote or just somebody's throwaway line, but it was, if it doesn't make you cry, it's not a strong enough motivational.
I would agree with that. And that's actually a very critical part of the process that we go through with clients, both for purpose and for vision, that if you can't capture how that would feel to arrive at that vision, arrive at that point where you have achieved that, then you're probably not internalizing it enough, and you probably haven't touched on exactly what is driving you. And part of bringing it from a concept and a sentence or a lofty ideal into the everyday, you need to be able to practice the way that you think that that's going to feel as well, and be able to daily, if possible, practice arriving at your vision. And what we see is, if the people that are committed to doing that, they accelerate their vision towards them much more quickly if they understand and practice seeing the vision, understanding what it takes to get there, and knowing how it feels to get there.
Yeah, I love that. Now, we talked earlier about the Homeward Bound movement and the trip to Antarctica. So tell us a little bit more about that, because I know you do a lot of work on visibility and leadership with the participants there. So tell us how that whole program works, how it came about, and what some of the challenges were in putting it together.
So Homeward Bound is a leadership initiative for women with a science or STEM background. And it was started back in 2005 in Melbourne, with a literal dream from the expert in leadership, Fabian Dattner, who's from Melbourne. And she had actually a dream about Homeward Bound and saw these women from science backgrounds on a ship going to Antarctica, and reached out to different people around her and said, is this a great idea or is this just a dream? And people confirmed with her that, in fact, it was a fabulous idea, and hence Homeward Bound was born. So every year we take around 100 women from STEM backgrounds from across the world through a 12-month leadership program, and the last 3 weeks of that are on a ship in Antarctica, having an immersive leadership experience that combines the content around leadership, strategy, visibility, and science with being in an environment completely disconnected from your family and friends and work and normal day-to-day life, where you can completely engage with building your resolve as a leader and understanding what you're here to lead for in a transformational environment. So we've now had around 400 women through the programs, and we've had participants from more than 50 countries around the world, and it has just been literally a global phenomenon since it began. And I think that combination of understanding that we're trying to get more women into leadership, because what women bring to the table from a leadership perspective is strengths around leading for the future, leading collaboratively, having a legacy mindset, and being really trusted with assets, whether they're monetary assets or people resources and assets. That's really the leadership skill set that we need in the world at the moment to solve some of our biggest problems with our planet. So the whole proposition of Homeward Bound is if we do get more women into leadership, that a lot of the big problems that we are seeing will be solved just through bringing more of those characteristics to the table. And we've had amazing candidates from around the world who have gone through the program. We've had the vice presidential candidate from Costa Rica. We've had the head of the Scottish Greens Party. We've had Nobel Prize winners, incredible scientists from all different fields. And yes, I was lucky to go on the Antarctic voyage last year. Julia, my business partner, and I, we alternate going each year to Antarctica, and just being with those women in Antarctica gave me incredible hope for the future of our world. They are absolutely amazing leaders, the most brightest minds that you have ever met, and really quite extraordinary female visionaries from all over the world who have been part of it and backed it as well. So it's quite an extraordinary privilege to be involved in something like that, and we're now seeing, despite, just in addition to going through the program and having transformational leadership outcomes in the program, the women who have been through the program in previous cohorts are now going on to have amazing impact in the world. We currently have about 20 of our alumna at the COP25 climate negotiations in Spain, and they have banded together and used their collective visibility to have greater impact there. And they were also mentored by the climate change luminary Christiana Figueres as part of leading up to COP25. Christiana joined us on the last Homeward Bound voyage in order to bring together all of their strengths and use them for big impact in the world. So it's not just changing leaders individually that we're passionate about. It's actually giving them one another and giving them a collective all around the world that makes their voices more visible and their impact greater.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and I mean, it sounds absolutely fascinating. I wish I could go along, but
we have men sometimes
one
in
of
the
yeah, well, maybe I have to apply for the faculty. One of the things that I think is really fabulous about that outcome, I imagine there's a lot of really strong bonds formed between women from different countries and different backgrounds and different fields that perhaps would never meet or at least not build relationships to that extent. And then as a collective, like you said, they have the ability to make so much more difference than they would individually.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of it. You're completely right. And a lot of them, because they've come from academic backgrounds, the entrenched structural issues around women in leadership in particular have been quite pronounced in those areas. So a lot of them actually have come from areas where they have been a sole woman in an organisation and they haven't felt like they've had a collective of people around them that really understand them and can help them to mobilise their own leadership. So that is undoubtedly one of the most powerful elements of the program itself, that they feel like they've found their people. They get there and they go, oh my gosh, there's all these people just like me, and they're there at the touch of a button. We have from our third cohort, they started for themselves a WhatsApp group once they finished the program. And there is not really an hour that goes by where that WhatsApp group's not pinging with them sending messages to one another. Here's a problem I need to solve. Can anyone help me? And when you've got 100 people placed around the world there to answer your questions at any time, it's a pretty powerful force for leadership going, okay, I've got these troubleshooters and this sounding board at any one time. And I'll never forget when we were in Argentina, which is where we leave for Antarctica from. And I'll never forget the moment where the women met each other in person for the first time. And they'd gone through 11 months of being in the digital program together, where they're coming together and chatting and going through the program every month. But when they came together in person for the first time, I have a sound recording on my phone of the noise of just 100 women who love each other but have not actually ever met before, in this bursting kind of bird song almost, because they found each other, they found their people, and they've all just commented that that's really a huge element of that they feel not alone anymore, and they feel like they can actually do the things that they want to do because they're supported.
Yeah. Now, it's fascinating to me. How did you first get started, and from zero when the idea was born and you put together the program? How did you market it? How did you get participants on board? How did you get supporters and sponsors on board? How did you get the faculty on board? Because clearly there's a very wide range of prominent leaders that contribute to the programs.
I think it was a range of things, but first and foremost, I think it was the right idea at the right time. There's no doubt in my mind that we struck an idea which came across women in leadership, which is critical at this point in time, the role of science and STEM fields, and how influential that is in, and necessary it is in the thinking around some of our biggest problems right now. And then leadership and the role of leadership in things like climate change and what is required around collaborative leadership in the world. And Homeward Bound is about all of those things. So being able to bring that idea to the world when all of those themes were critical and at the top of mind for so many countries and individuals around the world, I think gave it liftoff in a way which made it just go viral, actually. So we had amazing media interest from all over the world from the very first voyage and very first cohort, and that really helped to catapult the word and get it out there. And when you have that global platform and that global visibility that came with the right idea at the right time, that brought on board the sponsorship and interest in it that we needed to get everyone else on board. But there were a few specific things that Homeward Bound did do incredibly well that I think were critical to it, to what you're asking of how did it actually get off the ground. One was that the vision was crystal clear from the beginning. It was so clear that it was bringing together 1,000 women over 10 years from across the world with a science background to lead for the better outcomes of our planet. That was there from the beginning. It has not changed. And when you have a clarity of vision like that, it means that people can be dispersed anywhere in any location. They've all got their eyes in the same direction. They're all moving towards the same point. You don't actually need a lot of structure or over management or anything like that when you have that kind of clarity of vision. So I think that was critical. And then we also talk about in Homeward Bound that idea of the first follower, that Fabian was clever enough to get a band of initial first followers in different fields that got on board with the idea and then took it out to their own networks and got those first followers and second followers and third followers behind it in ways that just gave it legs. And I think a couple of the other critical success factors were strategy from the beginning. There was a strategy map, a one-page strategy from the beginning that everyone could look at and go, yes, I can see how I can be involved in that and how I can influence that. And the fourth one was investing in visibility from the beginning. So with the small resources that we initially had, we knew that investing in creating a public platform for Homeward Bound to stand on and for the women to stand on as soon as they came into the program, that was going to pay huge dividends and give us a huge return on investment. So investing in creating that media buzz and ensuring that we had digital platforms there that people could sign on to and connect to immediately meant that we were converting that amazing awareness about Homeward Bound into a following and into a movement very early on. So I think that were some of the key things that gave it that lift off.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's really important to, first of all, get those early adopters and have them spread the message as well. But I really like having a clear vision and a clear strategy that everybody can relate to, and it's all on one page so everybody can see where they fit into the overall strategy.
Yeah,
and
I think that has been one of the other fascinating pieces to witness as part of Homeward Bound, when you just have that many women leading together in an organisation which is quite organically evolving. It's not something that I had been part of before in a lot of the male-dominated organisations that I'd been in before. And it was amazing to watch it unfold, that when you had that clarity of vision and purpose and values and strategy from the start, most of the women involved didn't need really a lot of direction at all. Things would just happen, and people would go away and do things, and actions would pop up and results would pop up, and we'd keep each other in the loop as much as we needed to, but there wasn't really this need for a central management or hierarchy. And we often explain it now more like a brain, where you have different centers that are firing when they need to, and then they go dormant when they don't need to, and they connect to the rest of the whole, but not in any hugely structured way. And it has been and continues to be a fascination for me to see how leadership can be done differently, and to see how we can role model in Homeward Bound the kinds of changes to leadership that we're trying to see in the wider world, and just to see how it can really work when you do it differently.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I could go on talking. Actually, I did want to ask one more question about Antarctica before I move on. What are some of the wonderful sights you see on the trip?
Yes, I mean, it's a very long list, but I think I would describe it by saying it's not what you expect. You expect to go there and it's just all white and there's just snow everywhere, and it's kind of this monochromatic, similar-looking environment wherever you go. And one of the biggest shocks for me was just how diverse it is. One day you can be sailing through a channel with huge big black rock mountains on either side that are not covered in snow, and you feel like you're somewhere else in the world. The next day you are in the crater of a volcano that's turned into a lake, and it's, when you get out of the ship, it's warm water and hot springs and steam running everywhere. And then the next day you're at a penguin colony where everything's covered in snow, but because it's summer there's algae in the snow, which turns some of the snow mountains pink or some of them green, and you have these beautiful phosphorescent colours, and it's so different when you're there. And I think the other most meaningful thing that happened when I was there is you really can see in this apparently untouched place. It's not untouched, it's completely a bellwether for the impacts of climate change, just how much that is affecting our planet, the way that you can see how the glaciers have retreated so rapidly. And I remember the first time I ever landed on the Antarctic Peninsula and sitting there on a pebbled beach next to a seal and a penguin who, because they're not hunted there, they're not afraid of you, and just feeling the weight of responsibility on your shoulders about, as humans, the opportunity that we only have to change what's happening to the planet, and that those animals there, who that's their habitat, not us, we're the aliens in their environment. They can't do anything about that, but we can. So there is this power of Antarctica to crystallize some of the bigger issues in your mind and allow you to take personal ownership of them, rather than them seeming like these big unsolvable things. So that's why it's such a critical part of the program that we go to Antarctica or experience life really differently, and we can see our potential as leaders much more up close and in a magnified way.
Yeah, and the impact that we as humans have on that environment, which is essentially kind of a pristine environment.
Yes, except when you see pieces of plastic wash up on the beaches in Antarctica and you're like, actually, no, it's one big world and we're all connected and it's not pristine anymore, but compared to a lot of the rest of the world, it is,
All right. Well, as I say, I could go on talking ages about Antarctica and leadership programs and these retreats. It's a fascinating subject, but I'm aware of the time, so I think it's a good point to move on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round. And it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions. Hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers and inspire our listener to go and do something awesome today.
I will try. Shoot away.
So you ready? What's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
To be more innovative, I think my answer to that would be to innovate yourself first, and that really relates to that being visible to yourself. So if you want to be innovative, role model and innovate your own thinking and your self-awareness and your ability to be part of an innovative team or product. By becoming the kind of person who can do the things that you want to do with innovation. So I would say start with innovating yourself and see how you can create impact from there.
Yeah, that's great advice and very consistent, very congruent with your philosophy. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I think, and this is kind of probably a different kind of answer, but the best thing I've done to develop new ideas would be just to do it, to start right now, because I think that a lot of the problem can come with developing new ideas and innovation and being creative when you try too hard. And often you've already got the seed of an excellent idea in you and you're held back from trying to flesh it out and make it amazing. But if you just start right now and start small and prototype something and test it in safe spaces that are already available to you, you'll often get there a lot faster, a lot more cheaply, a lot more efficiently by just giving it a crack. I know that, one of our favorite things to do is just test new concepts and content on our core clients who love innovation and love being at the cutting edge of new stuff. And, we know that it's not always going to work, but we have developed rapport so that clients know that it's new, and just by going, yep, we're just going to give that a crack next week in that environment that we've already set up, that can be hugely helpful to just getting going with something that might be a good idea or it might not be.
Yeah. So I love the idea of testing things out rapidly and then also allowing yourself to fail rapidly so that you can move on to something else if it doesn't work. Because there's so many times, and I've said this myself, so I'm as guilty as anyone of, there's a good idea, I thought of that years ago, but because I didn't take action, of course it's not worth much.
Absolutely, which is it's a similar thing that I used to say when I was working in art galleries. Of some of my friends would say to me, "Oh, look at that piece of art! Like I could do that," and I'd say, "But you didn't." You could, but you didn't. So this person did it. It's on the wall of the gallery. So it's the same thing of just like, do it, have a go.
Yeah. All right. Now, do you have a favourite resource that you use a lot?
There's probably 2 answers to that question. One is more like a technical one, but I think my favourite resource is like unexpected spaces of letting your non-analytical brain do the work for you freely by giving it a break. So my kind of go-to tool in a way is going for a walk, having a shower, having a sleep, like stopping focusing on something to allow my best ideas and to come out. And that works almost every single time, rather than hammering away and trying to innovate or trying to create ideas. But then, on the technical side, we use a lot of our own methodology and tools, and really a lot of the best ideas out of that come out of having a strategic framework for something. So really understanding your goal very clearly and working within that as a container, as a system for innovation. And because it's like people say, it's much easier to create a piece of art if someone gives you kind of two shapes to work with than it is just to be given a blank canvas and start from that with all of the different possibilities. So if you really understand your goal of what you're trying to do, then the container that holds the innovation is much more effective, in my view.
That's great advice. I like the idea of having a container around a framework. Yeah, that sort of gives you structure to everything. And the idea of taking a break and doing something completely different, going outside of your environment is great too. We had a conversation about bike riding earlier before we started recording, and often I find myself, particularly if I'm on my own and not talking to anyone else, I find myself coming up with new ideas when I'm on the bike
Definitely.
alone.
It works so frequently, and I think we don't do it enough these days. So it's just a really good habit to get into. And I find myself making space for that by just committing to like a 5-minute walk around the block. That it doesn't have to be this huge, I'm going out for hours to solve this problem. It's just like get out, get your brain in different environments, stimulated in different ways, get some fresh air going, some movement, some green spaces, and often that will do the trick.
Great. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Definitely being a crazy strategist as I am, to really know your strategic fundamentals and stay connected to the vision. So just go back to the basics, know your purpose, vision, values, strategy, and how to activate it. But then keeping your communications connected to that. I've got a great friend, Trenna Probert, who's just launched an amazing initiative called Super Fierce in the finance field. And she's, in that startup phase where she's trying to get a project off the ground really fast. It's amazing. It's going to do great things for the world. But she's got this team that she needs to keep engaged. So she sends out these incredible weekly communications that talk about what's happened that week, but through the lens of the bigger vision and the bigger goals that they're working towards. And the ability for that to not just keep a project or on track, but to really inspire people and align them personally to a vision has been amazing to watch.
Yeah, great. I love that. And certainly comes back to that self-awareness part and keeping focus on the purpose and vision and values and then the strategy. All right. Now, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
That's a great question, and very much something that I'm passionate about in the space of visibility. I mean, I won't say the visibility to self bit again because you know that now. But I think if you can understand what your brand promise is as an individual or an organisation, then you are going to thrive. So, what's your change agenda? What are you really trying to change in the world, whether that's in life or work or an organisation or in your family even? And how are you the best person to do that? And if you can understand that dynamic and create an authentic story about that makes it personal and makes it relatable, and then practice it, then you are going to be able to differentiate yourself really well. And we do a little exercise, which I'm happy to share as a little takeaway, something tangible people can do around this. And that's, so have a go at just writing down, what is that brand promise? What are you trying to change in the world, and how are you the best person to do that? And then once you've just got a couple of ideas going, go and find a partner, your friend, a colleague, and challenge yourself to do a 2-minute elevator pitch version of that just off the cuff to them, telling them who your ultimate audience is and who you'd love to really hear that elevator pitch ultimately. And then they can give you some feedback, and then try to do it again for 1 minute, and then they give you some feedback. So you fine tune really quickly that idea of prototyping, exactly which are the best parts of my story that resonate immediately for people. And then you can practice that elevator pitch in different contexts, do that same exercise of 2 minutes and then 1 minute with some feedback in between to understand what your story is. And then you can feed it into really practical things like your bios on social media, or update your CV, or your web page, or whatever it is. It's something that we can all do to be a lot more effective, and it can take lots of different forms and be really pragmatic. But if you don't understand your story and kind of what you're offering to the world or to your organization or in your relationships, then you'll struggle to get that relatable anchor for you.
Yeah, I love that exercise. It's probably very challenging, but it does break it down into a nice little compact way to start doing it, and articulating that unique promise that you make as an individual or as an organisation.
Nothing like a bit of pressure to put yourself under to get it done too. And it's it's then something you can just, like, what we're coming up to Christmas and Christmas parties. It's easy to practice in those environments, in networking environments, and just give it a go and do it live and get that feedback. Challenge yourself, go and do it a little bit at your next events, and see how quickly you can see where people lean in and their ears prick up, and you understand the things that really resonate in your story.
Yeah, great advice. All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. This has been really fabulous. I've really enjoyed this immensely. Now, where can people reach out to learn more about you, about Visibility Co, and also about the Homeward Bound program?
So personally, I'm on most of the socials as Sarah is Social. And then you can find Visibility Co at visibilityco.com. And Homeward Bound you can find at homewardboundprojects.com.au, and Homeward Bound Projects on the socials as well.
All right, great. And we'll post links to those in the show notes so people can click straight through. Now, what parting piece of advice would you leave the listener, particularly if they want to be a visible leader in their field and in innovation?
I think to know that you can lead wherever you are, that leadership doesn't have to be a job title or anything lofty, that it's about a mindset that you bring to things, and that can be achieved by having a really courageous conversation in an important relationship, as much as it can be having a bigger platform out in the world or in a professional environment. And I imagine and like to wonder what the world would be like if we all took that leadership mindset to ourselves as a challenge every day, and how different the world could look. So I guess I would encourage everyone to think about how they are leading in different areas of life and how they could.
That's great advice, and I love that everybody is a leader in their own way and can lead in different circumstances, and particularly being self-aware and taking responsibility for their own outcomes and the things that they can influence. That's probably the first part of the mindset thing that you talked about.
Yes, and on a bigger scale, leadership is in crisis in our world. So there's an opportunity for everyone to lead with a huge amount of impact. There's a lot of space out there for leadership to be done differently, and we can all be a part of that.
Yeah, there is a bit of a leadership vacuum.
It certainly is.
So, yeah. All right. Well, finally then, Sarah, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I have been speaking a lot lately to a wonderful woman called Mim Bartlett, who is a leadership expert and a philanthropist and entrepreneur here in Melbourne. And she's doing incredible things across lots of different spaces, and is just a super connector who puts amazing people in touch with one another. And I feel like I should put you in touch with her, because she's put me in touch with lots of great innovators out there. So I think she'd be an excellent guest. And also Treda Probert, who I spoke about before as well, from Superfierce, who's definitely would fit the bill for this podcast as well.
All right. Well, we'll get introductions from you to Mim and Trina, and reach out to them and see if we can get them on the podcast
Absolutely.
as well. Thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today, Sarah. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot about your approach to visibility and leadership, about the Homeward Bound program and Antarctica, which is really fascinating. It's a wonderful program based on what I've read in all the media and the website that I saw, but also just getting out into Antarctica and seeing that really unique environment, but also the impact that we all collectively as humans are having on the planet and how that plays out in that space, I think is a great sort of lesson to incorporate in that whole leadership program. So thanks for sharing all that with us today. It's been fascinating, and I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lots of fun and would love to keep in touch.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and informative conversation with Sarah and took something away from her episode. Her structured approach to leadership and working on self-leadership first definitely resonated with me. And of course, I was absolutely fascinated by the Homeward Bound program and in particular the Antarctica trip. I'd love to know what you took away from Sarah's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Sarah Anderson. That is SARAHANDERSON. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Sarah Anderson. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Sarah there, as well as links to the Visibility Co. and Homeward Bound websites, to her social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in today's conversation. Sarah suggested we have a conversation with Mim Bartlett, Leadership and Wellbeing Coach, and also with Trina Probert of Superfierce on future InnovaBuzz podcast episodes. So Mim and Trina, keep an eye on your inboxes for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Sarah Anderson. Remember to check out our Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. But most importantly, the value is that within less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity about your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. And if you'd like our help to go even deeper into marketing mastery, or our help with producing your very own podcast, then send me an email to jurgen@innovabiz.co, and we'll set up a quick call just to have a conversation and get to know one another and find out if indeed we're a good fit. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast. We've got some more fantastic guests lined up, including Laura Pennington-Briggs of the Better Biz Academy and Greg Rollett of Ambitious Media Group. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the InnovaBuzz podcast at innovabuzz.com/subscribe. innovabuzz.com/subscribe. Make sure you never miss another episode. It would also mean a lot to me if you leave us a review, because what you think matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, or questions you have, so go ahead and share them in the comments below the blog post for this episode. Until next time, I'm Jurgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.